Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for tackling the weather to come out this morning. As I said, this is a challenge every year, early January, to come out to Founders Day. I like to say, go forth and bring the light. In Genesis, we find these words, and God saw the light, and it was good. You know, I don't know about you, but I'm looking forward to an exciting 2024 in Freemasonry in Indiana. For 206 years, Freemasonry has been alive and well. We went through a lot of societal changes during that time, but Indiana Freemasonry still survives. And I think about that 206 years ago, I drove over here in my semi-warm car with my heated seats. I didn't travel 3 days on horseback to get here. So when I complain, I'm a bit of a whiner, I guess. Our founding fathers, they met there in Madison, Indiana on that cold January 12th day in 1818. And they could not have imagined the world in which we live in today. Historically, Freemasonry has never been immune to societal changes. Hundreds of years ago, we went from operative Masons to speculative. When we were about 10 years old in Indiana, we went through something called the anti-Masonic movement. Masonry suffered losses like never seen before. Then the Gilded Age came, the early 1900s, the wars, I and II. And after World War II, there was such a joining of organizations like never before. All organizations, plus our fraternity, swelled. Again, societal changes. Recently, much of the national news has been centered around inflation and recession. Well, we know inflation is here, and the discussion is about when will the economic recession hit us. I want to submit to you this morning that we are already in a recession. It's a recession that is affecting we Americans. It is affecting Masons. It's affecting our families, our youth. And this recession is called a social recession. Hey, Dave, you're making this stuff up, right? A social recession is a decline in bonding and a decline in general well-being among members of a community as a result of reduced personal interactions. Does that sound familiar? We saw the skit that outlined, we're coming out of COVID, when people were inside, not able to meet with one another. A few studies recently have looked at this thing called social recession. Since the 1950s, there has been a decline in overall sociability. And you look at the different things that have happened in our society, starting with the upheaval. We had a president killed in 1963. The Vietnam War. We were in a war that wasn't even called a war, except they named it a Cold War. And then we get to 2000s, and suddenly we're taken over by this thing called technology. Isn't it wonderful? Michael, you should nod your head on that. But I tell you, since 2000, decline of sociability has only grown worse. The world of the 1950s is gone and is never returning. Next slide. Another study that has shown, especially with millennials, this sad fact here. When interviewed, 22% said they have 0 friends. 30% said they have no best friends at all. This is social recession. So what are Americans doing now? Well, some are browsing. All right? If you don't believe me, take a look at your screen time. The average browsing time right now is about 7 hours. Okay, let me get the math right. I have 8 hours for service to God and my distress-worthy brethren. I have 8 hours for my usual vocation, and I have 8 hours for refreshment and sleep. Well, I'm doing 7 hours of browsing, so I'm eating into one of those 3, aren't I? And I have a confession to make. Your deputy grand master has a mistress. Her name is Siri. She wakes me up every morning. She tells me when to go to bed. She helps me with my calendar. She helps me send emails and texts to all of you. And worst of all, I've even taken her to bed sometimes. However, I have good news. Freemasonry is well positioned and uniquely qualified to address this thing called social recession. You and I have a decision to make. We can become a drone in the hive of technology and a useless member of society, or we can go forth and be the light. What does that mean? 2 things. I can be the light within my lodge. I can be an encourager in my lodge. How often do we as Masons get together and you hear one Mason tear another Mason down? That's not what we're supposed to do, brothers. We're supposed to be encouragers. Build up the craft. What other things can we do within our lodge? We can look at what's going on with our brothers that are not showing up. Why are they not there? Are they sick? Do they have issues at home? Are there financial issues? How about our widows? Are we checking on them? Do we send them cards? A plant? And how about the ones that least can defend themselves? Our kids. Sometimes we get isolated. As we saw in the skit on the stage, we get caught up in our own Masonic world and we forget what's going on around us. Next slide. Oh, go back. The number 2, without and outside of our lodge, we must work in our local community to promote Freemasonry in the workplace, at play, at recreation. Working alongside other charitable organizations, we can join others and work with them. Identify ourselves as Freemasons with what we wear. We can be proud to be a Freemason, right, Carl? I want to make sure Carl wasn't asleep. Yeah, I'm proud to be a Freemason, that's right. So those are ways we can identify ourselves. Freemasonry is uniquely positioned to address this gap of social recession. I want to read something from our Indiana Monitor, a couple of things here. You and I as Freemasons stand in the northeast corner of today's society. And I can read from the Monitor because you that are not Masons, it's public information, right, Michael? Page 136 from the monitor says, let us begin at the northeast corner. The first stone of a building is placed in the northeast corner because that is the beginning. The line where darkness, the north, ends, and the light, east, begins. We're right now at the northeast corner of society. That's Freemasons. Page 141, in climbing the stairs of life, we are dependent on the assistance of others. We should therefore reciprocate by giving them assistance. Our labors should tend to advance society. We are to work for the good of mankind, not for ourselves alone, individual or local lodge. Page 135 from the monitor. Oh, by the way, the monitor, if you look on the front of that thing, it says Monitor and Freemason's Guide. Sometimes we shorten it to just Monitor. The science is no avail unless it leads to the practice of the art. And though we should possess all knowledge and be able in beautiful and sublime language to utter thoughts that arise in us as we contemplate the glorious work of our order, it profits us nothing. It is not by intellectual attainment or oral expression that we become Masons, but by the way in which we acquire the science and couple it with the art of temple building and practice in it our everyday association with our fellow men. No degree of masonry is of any avail unless it bears fruit. What fruit would we bear if we didn't have excuses, either individually or within our local lodge? Excuses like, Brother Dave, we're just a small lodge. What can we do? You know, since COVID, our guys are not coming back. And then there's the one, we just don't know what to do. Our brothers are getting old. You want them not to get old? We barely have enough money to keep the lights on. I wish we could do something for our community. Last slide. Listen, brothers, you and I, our lives, are the only advertisement that our community is going to see about Freemasonry. Our time has come. The time is now. We have much to offer when addressing this issue called social recession. Men are hurting. What will you and I do? That question was asked from this podium after the skit this morning. The choice is to be the light will not be made by your local lodge. That choice will not be made by your Grand Lodge. It's a personal choice, a personal decision to you and I to be that light with our brothers inside the lodge and the community at large outside the lodge. And with those outside, they're looking to us. They're looking for someone that they can call friend and brother. Go forth and be the light. Thank you, brothers.